So if you're a fan of my normal work videos or lawn care or landscaping, you'll definitely want to go ahead and skip this one. If you're looking for advice on how to change your brakes, you'll also want to skip this video. I'm going to show you a giant pile of parts and supplies here in a few seconds that cost quite a few hundreds of dollars. And so I said, you know what would be questionable and potentially illegal is let me make a video on this brake job, then I can claim all these expenses as business expenses. That's the backstory. If I wind up in federal prison for felony tax evasion in a year or two, you'll know that this is not a good idea. But somebody's got to try it, right? My wife and I were driving one day in town and we heard some squeaking, some squealing from the brakes. And I said, oh, I guess that's brake jobs needed. So without even looking at anything, I went ahead and ordered 2 sets of brake pads and 4 brake rotors. In this video, though, you can see that puddle of brake fluid on the ground. Once I parked it and was waiting for the parts, this back rear caliper finally failed, and then I was like, okay, it's the caliper that needs it. This same part failed about 3 or 4 years ago. It was in August, so I didn't have time to fix it because I was mowing, so I took it to a local shop. I want to say that local shop charged somewhere around $300 for it. I bought a remanufactured one for about $70 with a $25 core charge. So if I would have done a little digging, I might have avoided buying all the rotors, buying all the brake pads. But as you'll see, I still needed some extra parts. It wasn't just the caliper. Getting the parking brake cable off, I couldn't figure out how to do it just by looking at it. I tried for probably 30 or 40 minutes. No, it wasn't that long. It was a lot longer than I should have before I finally just pulled up a YouTube video and somebody explained how to do it. And then, you know, within 5 minutes, I had it off. The other thing that made this job miserable was that I went online to O'Reilly. And if you've ever gone to a car parts store, you just type in the car that you have and it'll pull up parts that match. So I saw multiple brake pads and brake rotors, and you know, I just picked the cheapest one because it said, hey, it'll fit. I ended up getting pretty much all the wrong parts for everything except the brake caliper. So now as I'm checking out these brake pads, it's really weird. I don't know if the hydraulic brake fluid has just kind of dissolved the brake pad material over time, but there's a lot less meat on these pads than any of the other ones. And even as I, scrape it away on the front end, you'll see that it kind of just dissolves and wipes away in the rag. So I don't know what was going on there. I still definitely would have needed brake pads for this side. And from what I've read, when you do brakes, it's best to do them in pairs. I don't know if that's true or not. So I still decided to go ahead and continue with my plan to swap the rotors and the brake pads. This is installing the new caliper hardware. These are what the brake pads kind of move back and forth on, these silver clips. And this is where we get to me realizing I made my first mistake. These are the brake pads that I got, which are much smaller than the ones that I just took off. And so now I'm saying, all right, well, look at how much meat that one has compared to this. But then that's when I realized, wait a second, these things don't look the same. What did I do? That's not right. I figured I just had the wrong box, so I went ahead and got the other box of brake pads to compare them, and guess what? They didn't match up either. So at this point, it was too late to get the part that I needed, so I just set it to be delivered to my local O'Reilly the next day, which is where we're at now. As I take this rotor off, you can see I've changed gloves. That's how you know it's a new day. The old rotor doesn't look too bad. I've actually saved the old rotors just in case I need to turn them later. I think I probably could have gotten away with using the old rotors. But again, reading on brakes, they say if there's any imperfections on those rotors, it'll translate to how the brake pads wear. So I said, I'll just go ahead and get brand new rotors and, put those on since I'm putting new pads on. I probably didn't need to, but better safe than sorry. On this rotor, there seemed to be some kind of piece of metal just stuck right on the surface. I didn't like that, and later there was another one I found. You can get them off with just the flathead screwdriver, just scrape it off. That's one thing to check your rotors for before you put them on. So at this point you think, wow, Brad, that looks pretty good. You're well on your way to having your brake install job done. But no, because what then I saw was that the brake pads were overhanging the rotor by, half an inch or so. And that's not normal. That's not how those are supposed to work. This is the face of somebody who has realized something is wrong, but doesn't know what yet. So now I know something's messed up, so I'm saying, did I install something wrong? Holding the old caliper up to the new one. Then finally it dawns on me. Something's not right though, because that's not how it's supposed to be. Is the rotor not right? Is this the wrong rotor? Let's see how big the old rotor is, trace a little circle around it, put the new rotor in that circle, and yep. So it turns out I bought rotors that were closer to 12 inches. I should have gotten the rotors that were closer to 13 inches. It's a new day again. I lost another day. Had to get the new parts shipped to the store again. These ones look like they work. Get some brake parts cleaner. You want to do that anytime you have new rotors. There's some kind of oil. I guess it's to keep them from rusting, you know, before you install them. But you definitely don't want that oil on the brake pads. Oh my gosh. So we've got the new caliper on. That's the only thing I got done that first day. We've got the correct brake pads. That was the second day. And now here on the third day of work, we've got finally our correct rotors. The other thing I picked up on my third trip to O'Reilly's, or whatever it was, I've lost count at this point, but some brake pad grease, which is actually a little bit of a misnomer, because if you put grease on the braking system itself, the friction parts, your brakes won't work and you'll kill yourself. So that grease is only for portions where, you know, some of the components move back and forth. It's not for where the brake pads contact the brake rotor. So you've got to be very careful not to get them in that. So hooking the caliper back up, got all that connected, got the emergency brake back on, and now I've got to bleed the brake system. As the car has been sitting there, you saw that puddle. You may have seen some of the fluid on the tire. I lost a lot of brake fluid, so we've got to fill it back up. So you unscrew the cap, fill the reservoir up, and then this is where my wife is helping me bleed the system. All right, now push. That's just, you have one person pump on the brakes while the other one opens this bleeder valve. And the air that's trapped in the system, okay, let off, will come out of that bleeder valve. But you have to keep closing it, because if she let her foot off of the brake while it was open, it'd just suck air back through there. So this is something that I think we probably spent, I don't know, between 5 and 10 minutes doing. If there's air in your brake lines, your brakes will not function the way they're supposed to. So this was something I was really careful to do, you know, make sure I spent a lot of time on it, make sure I didn't see any air bubbles coming out. I think the last few times that I did it, it was all just brake fluid coming out, and I didn't see any air bubbles. And, you know, of course, by this point, I've tested the car several times, so I think everything was done right. Do the emergency brake slowly. The emergency brake seems to work well. Now we just go ahead and put the tire back on. When I looked at the front brake pads and rotors, again, all the rotors on this vehicle, it's 2015, but it only has about 55,000 miles on it. So all of the brake rotors looked really good. And the brake pads, aside from this left rear, all the brake pads still had what I would consider at least half life left to them. And the front ones looked like they had even a little bit more. I didn't film the other side because there really wasn't any difference, except that I wasn't replacing the caliper. So because of that, I had to get a C-clamp and push the caliper piston back. So here's part of the old caliper. You can see it's definitely weathered, but there is still a lot of meat on those. So here's the left rear I just replaced. Here's the right rear that I just took off of this side. And here is a brand new pad. So I don't know if it had to be replaced, but again, I read it, you should do it in pairs. So I just went ahead and did it. I had already bought this stuff. That's pretty much the end of the saga. And as a final reminder, if you see a report of me landing in federal prison for tax evasion, don't do this. You can't make just any video on anything you buy and claim it as a business expense. But it is a fun little experiment. So follow along and see whether or not. Thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate it.